Hey guys, welcome to video blog number 2. What can I say beyond wow and thank you, and I'm humbled by all the comments on my first video blog. I think that set a new record for the most comments in one of my videos. I started answering them and then realized that that wasn't going to do it justice, so I'm going to address as many of the comments as I can and answer some of your questions. So yeah, again, thank you. I saw some comments about, do I have a PayPal address or Patreon account? I'm flattered. Maybe someday. I want to up my game a little bit before I would think about asking for any money. I'd also want to have some premium content to offer in return. So maybe someday. Right now my goal is to get workshop back up and running, do the beginner radio and TV videos about like what you need to get started in the hobby, and get back to doing some projects and put out some better content. I sort of give you a very brief version of how I got started making YouTube videos, or it was more why I did. It's because I started doing TV restorations and I just wanted to show, hey, cool, I got this old TV working, take a look at it. And I don't think I even, well, I know I didn't speak in my first video, and maybe the second and third. They're all still up there. I haven't looked at them in years. And I made a comment about my voice. I don't hate my voice now. I hated my voice when I started editing videos. Eventually I got used to it, and I'm glad that some of you seem to like it as well. Thanks. But back to how I got started, what I wanted to do was give credit to some of the other YouTubers out there. For sure, a huge inspiration in me getting started was the old 64 Goat. In particular, his old footage on repairing a Motorola VT71, because that was the first real vintage TV restoration that I did, where I actually studied it and got the right parts and went online and joined the community and did it right. Before then I had tinkered around and swapped tubes and poked around where I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I saw his video, I was like, hey, that's what I'm working on too, and here's somebody else doing a really cool video about it. Maybe I could aspire to do that too. Some others, I honestly don't remember if I watched their videos before I started making my own or after, but they were certainly early influences, and that'd be Radio TV Photonaut, Retro Chad, Joe R. Nunn. I'm sure there are others, so don't feel offended if you don't hear your name. I've watched a lot of YouTubers, and since then I've certainly tried to up my game. Shango does awesome videos, especially over the last year or so. I like his real in-depth troubleshooting and methodology about how to think logically about getting a set up and running. Really, really good content. Mr. Carlson's lab, a little envious of his setup in the basement with all that great test equipment, and he does some nice in-depth videos. There are others too. If you go to my main page, I have a link on the side of channels of other people that I like. And then there are other YouTubers who aren't necessarily all about vintage electronics, but I enjoy their presentation style. For example, UXW Bill and Technology Connections. So something else I thought I'd do in these video logs is address questions I've been asked numerous times over the years. So I thought I'd tackle one of them in this video, which is, how did I get started in this hobby of vintage electronics? So let's go back to the beginning. When I was a kid, I think I got one of those Radio Shack, like 101 electronics kits, where you had little spring doodads, and you can connect the resistors and capacitors and make some basic circuits. I really enjoyed that, and I'd like to take things apart. And as I got a bit older, I started going out with my buddies on garbage night. We go garbage picking. And this was in early 80s, early to mid 80s. And boy, that was a great time for garbage picking if you wanted to find tube electronics. From the 70s through the 80s, everybody was throwing out their tube stuff to get new solid state stuff. So, and then we were in especially fertile grounds in northwest suburbs of Chicago. And I think about 5 nights a week, different parts of our town would do garbage. And so almost every night we could go out on our bikes and find, it'd be a rare night that we didn't find something with tubes in it. A lot of TVs, a lot of console stereo type things. But we were on our bikes, so we couldn't drag back a whole TV, but we'd pluck the tubes out and take smaller things home. And that's how I definitely got familiar with tubes. And there were as we got a little bit older, we started going to Hamfest. There were a lot of Hamfests back then, and tons of like what you call boat anchor stuff, war surplus radios, tons of test equipment, all kinds of tube-based stuff, and the prices were quite reasonable back then. So I got to tinkering around with that. One particular night, not too far from home, I found an Admiral TV. One of the old 10-inch black and white Admirals like you've seen me work on so much, and that was the first real vintage TV that I managed to bring home intact, because he had broken up the cabinet and just the chassis was there, and I was able to get it home, and I tinkered around with that for quite a while. Never got it fully working. I got a raster, but I couldn't get reception because honestly I didn't really know what I was doing, and I had no service info. I would just swap tubes around and poke around and probe around and see what I could make happen. Then I went to school. I went to college, and I got a degree in electrical engineering, and that got me on track to do solid-state stuff, microcontrollers. The first job I got out of college was doing replacement remote controls, universal replacement remote controls with microcontrollers. So infrared remotes where you could put in there, you've got a Sony TV or a Panasonic, and it would look up the codes for the key presses and do all that stuff. So, and I got into building my own computers. So for quite a while, vintage electronics went on the back burner, and I was all about gaming and building, getting the latest and greatest Pentium processor and overclocking and all that good stuff. Flash forward to around 2006, I think, 2007, 2008, thereabouts. I had got my own place in the city, and I taught myself to program. I switched from engineering to programming, but I wanted to decorate my place, and I got to thinking I kind of liked Art Deco stuff, so I started looking on eBay and Craigslist a little bit, and I started getting some furniture. And then one day I saw a Philco 3710, I think it is. I know I did a restoration series on it, didn't quite finish it, but I think that was it. And that was the first, or maybe it was a Philco 3810 tabletop. Can't remember. So one or the other, but certainly those were the two first real antique radios I got. The Philco 3810 classic bullet radio with the faux finish, and a 3710 big console. And that's when I really got back into the hobby, where I dug out my my old tubes and started buying some new equipment and joined Antique Radio Forum, and broke out soldering iron for the first time in quite a while. So that was how I got back into radios, or into radios I should say. TV is a little bit more of an interesting story, I think. So, TV. Well, I think it was January of 08, maybe 07. I'd have to go back and look to be certain. And I was doing freelance programming. I'd go online. There were various sites you could go to, and you could bid on jobs, or somebody would want some work done on the website. I found a gig where somebody wanted to do some stuff with Craigslist, basically make like a a search engine that would search like all the Craigslist at once. I was kind of new to Craigslist and didn't know a whole lot about it, so I wanted to familiarize myself with it. So I went to our local Chicago Craigslist. I'm based out of Chicago, and I started searching around just to see how their search engine worked, what the options were, what kind of results you'd get back. And I started seeing some Art Deco stuff, some antique stuff, and thought, hey, there's some interesting stuff around here. And then I stumbled across an ad where somebody was willing to trade some antiques that were in the basement. They were very vague about what they might have, for helping fix their computer or their printer issue, or it's some type of personal computer issue. I was kind of tight on money at the time, and I thought, hey, what the heck? It's not that far from my place. I've got some free time. I'll take a chance and I'll see what they might have. So it was a bitterly cold night. It was like 10 below, something like that. I went over to an unfamiliar part of town. I went to this, I think it was a house. Rang the bell, and an elderly woman answered the door. And she had 3 or 4 yappy dogs that came marching up behind her and were nipping at me. And she invited me in, and I could see right away that her place was filled with all kinds of crazy stuff. She was into doing arts and crafts and woodworking. She had Dremel tools out. I think she was working on a canoe. There was just all kinds of crazy stuff scattered all over. And she was an interesting character, in a good way. We got to talking. It turns out her husband had passed away, and she was looking to downsize a bit, and this was the house I believe she said she grew up in. And she showed me what her problem was. It turns out I think all I had to do was fix a paper jam and clean some dog hair out of her mouse. And I was just happy to do my good deed for the day, and I was going to be on my way. Because the stuff I saw that she had that she was immediately offering me was like a 4-poster bed and stuff that I just really had no use for. But then she said, well, okay, I get it, you don't want any large, heavy furniture, but I got something in the basement that might interest you. So we went down to this dark, dirty basement, and she had a TV. And it was filthy. And I almost turned around immediately and said, yeah, it's interesting, but I am glad I could help you out. I'm going to be on my way. But she said, no. This was like the first TV. First TV in our family. Remember, my father bought it way back right after the war. And, I'd like you to have it. At least take a look at it. So it was dark by then. It was bitterly cold. I thought, hey, she really wants me to have it, fine. I'll just pick it up, get it in my car, and get home, and whatever. I'll tinker around with it. Maybe it's got some interest to it. And it was really, really heavy, but I managed to lug it into my car, and it came with a stand. And I got home and Googled it, and I immediately came across Phil Nelson's website, and I realized what I had was an RCA 630 TS, basically the first commercial TV available from RCA after World War II. Kind of the first Model T of TVs, the first really TV made in any large quantities. And she had the original stand, which was really nice, and it was a fairly low serial number. And I grabbed the Old English and started cleaning it up, and it turned out that underneath that 1/4 inch of filth, it was actually in really, really good condition. And I have shown this set to you guys in videos. The cabinet I pretty much finished restoring. The chassis I still haven't touched. I restored a chassis from another identical model and swapped that into that cabinet. But someday I'll get around to restoring that very first TV that I ever got, doing the electrical restoration. I've kind of been saving that for a special occasion. But that's how I got the bug. Once I realized, and then I joined Video Karma and noticed the TV section of Antique Radio forums and traded a bunch of emails with Phil Nelson, and I just dove headfirst into the hobby because I also like doing kind of obscure hobbies and doing the research, and it was cool to have this online community, and then you could go onto eBay and search and hunt and find out the history of these sets and try to find the old service info and old photos and old ads and find other guys out there who have the same set and trade stories. So that's what got me started. And shortly after that, I found another Craigslist ad and got a Motorola VT71 and a Predicta Princess. Those are the first 3 antique TVs I got, and the rest is history. And yes, I will be the first to admit it is an odd hobby. It's not for everyone. Not everyone appreciates these old sets, but I find it interesting, and there are other folks who do too, and it's a pretty good community. A lot of good, helpful folks out there if you want to get your hands dirty and dig into an old TV. I'll be doing an upcoming video where I talk about some beginner's tips on getting started in the hobby, some equipment you should get, and some safety tips. Another reason that I've kept with this hobby, both radios and TVs and vintage electronics in general, is that I did like the solid state stuff when I was younger, but more modern stuff, it's just too darn small. Everything's kind of got a microcontroller in it, and there seems to be a lot more programming and software than there is soldering. So that's why I like the old stuff. I like to work with my hands. I do programming all day for work. I don't want to do more programming for a hobby. That's all I got for now. I hope you enjoyed my second video blog, and again, I am overwhelmed and humbled by all your kind words. Bye for now.